Hatchet. It remains a very, very good FA Cup final. And Hatchet! What a magnificent goal!
And that cut off quite quickly. Good evening and welcome to All Things Sky Blue match preview. Our home game on Saturday at 12:30 on Sky against Norwich City. Shortly I'll be joined by Mark Smith and Adam from the Pinken and Norwich City podcast. But before I do, as you can see, I'm not in my normal Sky Blue tavern surroundings, and there's been a lot of technical issues, so I apologise for being back home. I hope this doesn't downgrade the views too much, but hopefully normal service will resume for the next one, and then obviously our corresponding fixture away at Norwich preview. So just before I do bring my guests in, just remember where you can find us. We are on Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're on YouTube. Please go and like and subscribe to anything that we do. It is much appreciated. If you listen to us on podcasts, please rate us 5 stars, and you can find us on Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. We're partnered with the Anecdote Sports Bar at the CBS Arena, and we're also partnered by the Tavern. Unfortunately, I'm not there tonight, but we are partnered with the Tavern, Sky Blue Tavern, as well in town. And again, this year, we are sponsored by Wright Steel Fabrications, who can do your steel fabrication work up and down the country, but mainly in the Coventry and Warwickshire area. So, without further ado, let me bring in Mark. Good evening, Mark. You okay?
Evening, Stuart. Yeah, good. Thank you. Evening, everyone.
Good. And Adam from the Pinken. How are you, Adam?
Yeah, very well, thank you. A little bit tired, as I mentioned to you previous to recording. I was at Selhurst Park last night for our 4-0 defeat, so didn't get home till the early hours of the morning. So, feeling the effects tonight. Yeah,
I can imagine. And look, we've been there when the results haven't gone your way and you've had a long journey home. You'd been more brightly and sprightly, wouldn't you, if you'd won? But it's a little bit more somber. So before we get into it, then Adam, if you can just let us know what you guys do and where we can find you.
Yeah, so we're the Pinken, which is sort of the sports arm of the Eastern Daily Press and Norwich Evening News newspaper. But we kind of have a big digital platform. So, we're on YouTube, match previews, reviews. We speak to the managers in press conferences. So everything you need is on our YouTube channel. Of course, we've got all the social medias. So X at Pinken, Facebook Pinken, Instagram Pinken. And of course, we're on all the podcast platforms. We record every Saturday night post-match or Sundays for away games. And we dissect everything Norwich City, from transfers to games to all the nonsense. And that's the place to find us.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And again, once again, thank you for joining us. It's much appreciated.
No problem.
So, let's start with Norwich. Let's start with you, Adam. Not the best of starts, and you are leaking a few goals. You lost to Oxford, I think it was, on the opening day of the season. I think have you had a win? How's pre-season gone, and how's it been going into this season and not starting the best?
Yeah, it's been quite a busy summer in all told. Of course, the end of last campaign, the disappointment of losing to Leeds United away in the playoff semi-final second leg quite heavily. That obviously spelled a change. David Wagner departs. Our sporting director, Ben Napper, of course, been in the building now for almost a year. He sort of targeted his own manager, his own boss, someone to lead Norwich City. Of course, that is the appointment then of Johannes Hoff-Torup, who was manager at Nordsjælland over in Denmark. Got quite a good track record of bringing through younger players. He sort of partnered up with a Ghanaian sort of football arm, and he sort of brought through a lot of younger players from that region. And I think that's something that maybe caught the eye for Ben Napper, who, I suppose had worked at Arsenal previously as a loans manager. He's also got a kind of a view to bring through younger talent, and that's something that Norwich have always prided themselves on, bringing through players through the academy. And I think that's kind of where the pipeline has now been reconnected. Norwich, of course, went into pre-season, it started off with a win at Northampton. We then had lots of difficult tests. We went over to Belgium and played Liège and Bruges. Lost against Bruges, who of course are in the Champions League. We drew at Liège. Then we went to home game against Magdeburg, who are second division in Germany. Lost that one. Who else we played? St. Pauli at Carrow. We lost that one as well. And we went over to Austria to play Hoffenheim. We got a 2-2 draw there. So it was quite a difficult pre-season against difficult opposition, but we could see the sort of patterns of play and what Torup is trying to bring to Norwich in terms of a style and an identity, starting to maybe bear fruit a little bit. And I think we all expected probably that to bleed into the season and it be a little bit of a slow start, because he has got lots of players who are, I suppose, part of two different regimes. Maybe they're part of the David Wagner regime. They're probably part of the Dean Smith prior to that. Some players, even Daniel Farke before that. And obviously Torup is trying to bring through some of the younger players through the academy, but also some of the signings we've made this summer. And trying to get that all to blend is quite difficult, particularly when they're all trying to play a completely different style to what was expected from them last season. And I think we saw that against Oxford, who were bang up for it on the opening day at their own ground. And I think we sort of came out of that one and everyone was maybe panicking a little bit, but then forward on a couple of weeks and we've had a couple of good draws in games against Blackburn and Sheffield United, where even though maybe I think both those games Norwich probably had an argument to try and win the game and maybe had the better of play, leaky defence is still a bit of an issue and something that needs to be worked on. I think there's still progress to be made in that area, but certainly going forwards, they're creating lots of opportunities and some of the new signings look like they're starting to maybe make their mark. And I think despite even the 4-0 defeat last night, I think most fans actually came away from Selhurst Park feeling relatively positive against a Crystal Palace team that started a really strong side. The likes of Eze were in there, Mark Gahey, Norwich very much second string, but the patterns of play and I think the scoreline probably flattered Palace in the end. Most fans probably felt Norwich, I think maybe 1-0, 2-0 would have been fair, but that clinical edge you get from the Premier League and the players that they have probably told in the end. But it's a work in progress and lots of positive signs, and I think fans, despite the lack of wins so far, are relatively upbeat.
Wow. Well, to be fair, that's not what I was expecting. I was expecting a bit more downbeat from you, just because, we always look at Norwich, don't we, Mark, really? And it's always a difficult game. And I'm not saying that it won't be a difficult game on Saturday because, if they're going to beat anybody, when they're not playing very well, it's going to be Coventry because we haven't got the best track record against them, really. How are you feeling about Saturday after our 1-0 win against Oxford for the second time of playing them, just like we've played Bristol City twice in a short space of time as well? How are you feeling?
I'm more positive now. We know that Ben Sheaf made an appearance last night and we got, 15, 20 minutes out of him. So I think that bodes well for Saturday. So I'm quite happy that he's back. You're right. Norwich have got a very good record against us. I think we've only taken 1 point since they've been relegated from the Premier League. So that needs to improve and we need to try and, it'd be a good time to beat them. I think if there's any time to beat Norwich, it possibly is now because obviously, as Adam mentioned, they've had a lot of ingoings, outgoings. So it's possibly a good time to play them. But look, Norwich are a good side. And I saw the highlights against Palace and Adam's spot on there. The result did flatter Palace a lot because their keeper made some good saves from some good counter-attacks. And I think with Norwich, what we have to be careful of is obviously Josh Sargent is the obvious threat for me up front. Always plays on the last man, always making good diagonal movements, looking for that opportunity. And that if you give him a chance, he more than likely will put them away. So he's the obvious threat. I like Borja Science on that sort of wing position. I think he's a good player as well. Norwich haven't had the best starts, but to say they won't be doing well this season is a ridiculous thing to say. I think there'll be a side that, similar to Bristol City last week, I think can will probably be there or thereabouts in the Championship. Probably maybe top 10 at least. So it's a test for us. But I think with the return of Sheaf, I think we go into the game massive boost, and hopefully we can get those 3 points.
Okay, again, maybe not what I was expecting really from you either, Mark, to be fair. But look, we're both fairly optimistic. Adam, we know what it's like to have a slow start. We've done it for the past 2 seasons, and we were kind of hoping that this one would be slightly different. It's kind of worked that way, that it's been a little bit of a quicker start, really. I haven't look. I will be honest. I haven't seen the team that you put out in your last league game to the cup game. I'm presuming that you made changes. How's Jonas going into the games? Is he more pressing? Is he more pass it through the thirds? How does he set up his teams, and what team do you expect to start?
Yeah, sort of 7 changes last night for Norwich. Plenty of those more kind of with the view of Saturday and trying to get the win. I think we expected maybe to go to Palace and know it was going to be a difficult test, even with our strongest 11. And you don't want to be losing players to injury this early on, particularly with a transfer window closing as well pretty shortly. It could be a detrimental impact on Norwich moving forwards. But yeah, I think what we've seen so far is very much a 4-3-3 system, which is quite different to what Norwich have played previously. I think, even spanning Daniel Farke, Dean Smith, David Wagner, 4-2-3-1 was pretty popular for those managers. But I think they were probably less so Farke, but certainly Dean Smith and David Wagner, they were much more pragmatic, much more defensive minded, I think. And that didn't really tend to bode well with Norwich City fans who are much more sort of wedded to attacking football, creating lots of opportunities, high-scoring games. I think most fans would rather Norwich win 4-3 every week than 1-0. And that's kind of, I think, what we're going to see under this boss. Norwich are scoring goals but leaking plenty. But the impetus is very much attacking, patterns of play, being quick on the counter. They've got some pretty dangerous threats. You mentioned Sargent, Borja Sainz. Those two are pretty key to that attacking third and that attacking areas. They've brought in a few other sort of recent additions that can sort of, I suppose, challenge for those slots, I suppose, moving forwards. A guy called Antti Cernach, they paid almost sort of £8.5 million for, which is for Norwich City's sort of championship spending is quite high. They sort of reinvested the money they got for Adam Eder, who's made a move to Celtic, and I think that's probably been a pretty key factor for Norwich. They've tried to sort of sell on some big assets, but also they've reinvested into players that can suit what Torp wants to do in terms of having possession, creating opportunities, these patterns of play that we're starting to see develop. And I think Norwich, gradually will get there. It's going to be probably still another month or two, I'd say, before this team maybe clicks completely. And whether that will be too late for sort of Norwich to be trying to build gaps maybe to teams above them, but hopefully not, and they can keep themselves in and around it. And I think the season, as I sort of mentioned off camera, could be a little bit of a slog. But I think maybe, who knows? These things can happen quicker than you expect. But I think next season they'll be in a much better place than maybe they are at the moment.
Okay, fantastic. Going into the players then that you've brought in, obviously you've mentioned a couple already. One that kind of springs to mind because obviously he was at Coventry, and that's Callum Doyle. How has he settled in? Do you like him as a player?
Yeah. I think he's probably caught the eye quite a bit. I think certainly the recent home game in the league against Sheffield United, I think the stats for him personally were sort of being shared around on the NCFC social space. He was an absolute rock. And I think almost you want your centre-backs to almost not really notice them, because then they're not making mistakes. They're doing their job and keeping the other team out, and that's exactly what he's doing. I think, on the ball, he looks so comfortable, which is exactly what Norwich want from their centre-backs, ball playing centre-backs, able to bring the ball out and build up from the back, moving forwards into the final thirds. And he's comfortable in that position. Of course, his versatility as well, the fact he can deploy at left-back or left centre-back is huge, I think, for Norwich. They've signed a lot of left-footers this summer, and he sort of ticks that box. And I think the ability then maybe in games to switch him from like on Saturday against Sheffield United, he started the game at centre half, and then during the second half, Torp decided to change it and push him into left back. And the fact that he's just comfortable in both positions, I think, is a huge plus for Norwich. And I think maybe there's a little bit of element of surprise. The fact he's had 2 seasons now in the Championship, a really good one with Coventry, and obviously injury hit at Leicester, but even then still, showing a player who's a top player, and I think will only grow and maybe go further on in the game. And had a really good pre-season with Manchester City. Norwich had to bide their time a little bit to get him. I think they wanted him earlier in the window, but of course Man City had lots of players that were at the Euros or at the Copa America, and of course that meant he kind of had to sort of fill a gap for the time being. But Norwich were patient, they got their man, and I think, moving on into the season when this team starts to gel, I think they've got a real gem.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, we love him, Mark, don't we, as a player? And there was talks that he might be coming back to us, and we were all getting overexcited by all the talk, weren't we? And then obviously we knew that it weren't going to happen when he signed for Norwich.
Yeah, he's got a big future in the game. I think he signed a long-term contract at Manchester City, so I imagine it would just be a one season stint at Norwich. But yeah, Adam's spot on. I mean, that's exactly the player we saw at Coventry as well. Very good, very comfortable on the ball, very cultured centre half, but he could defend as well. I mean, I think I could see him, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I think he's a potential England player. I think he's a player that could get in England side maybe the next 5 years or so. He's still very young. But if you look at the way he plays, he's very mature in how he plays the game. He's almost a player that kind of befit his years, really. He's almost like someone who's in his 30s at the peak of his career, and he's only, 18, 19. So, fantastic talent. I just hope he has an off game on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. Obviously, talking about the players that have left, Gabi Sara, you've mentioned Adam Adia. I know I haven't pronounced that right. Ben Gibson and Sam McCallum. Is there any others that have left that I've missed out? Obviously, I was meant to do a little bit of research, but technical issues stopped me from doing that. Is there anybody else that's left? Is there anybody else that you think that's going to be a bit of a miss for your side?
Yeah, of course, we've lost John Rowe, who was so crucial for us last season. A player who came through the academy and sort of had a breakthrough, I'd say, last campaign. I mean, he had sort of been in and around it. He got sort of some Premier League appearances under Dean Smith when we got relegated, and then injury hit. First season back in the Championship. Last season under David Wagner, kind of got thrown in due to injuries and never really looked back. I mean, he had a scoring run at the start of the campaign where I think he scored in 5 consecutive games, scored at the CBS last year, and Norwich almost held out for a victory before Ben Gibson's own goal. And he wasn't quite the same player, I'd say, post-Christmas. Injuries kind of, I suppose, derailed a little bit his campaign. The latter stages of the season did come back into it, but just wasn't quite at those same levels. I'd say, the fitness, the fact he's probably burnt so much energy in those first 6 months, and he just didn't quite hit the same heights. And I think most Norwich fans would have hoped to try and keep him in and around it this season and keep him at the Carrow Road, at Carrow Road for this campaign. But disappointment actually on the opening day of the season against Oxford. He was supposed to be in the starting 11, withdrew himself from the matchday squad about an hour or two before the game and said, I'm not going to be available, despite the fact at that point there was no firm bids for him, no firm interest really in him particularly. There was some noise, I suppose, around other clubs, but certainly nothing to, withdraw himself from a matchday squad. He then made himself unavailable for the sort of couple of games after that, and Torup just didn't want to sort of trust to throw him in because, his attitude maybe had declined. Norwich have subsequently sold him to Marseille, so he's going over to France to test himself in, of course, the Liga 1, which I think, we can maybe debate the levels of that league in terms of sort of the elite around sort of Europe. But certainly an opportunity, I suppose, to play in Europe, maybe try and stake his claim for a push to the Premier League in a few years if he does well. But Norwich have benefited, I'd say, from the sale. I think nearly £14 million plus plenty of add-ons and sell-on clauses. So for a player that's come through the academy, not a bad sale. But I think Gabi Sara's the big one we've lost, of course, as you mentioned. For me, probably should have been one of the contenders for Championship Player of the Season last year. His numbers were unbelievable for a central midfielder. Just the talent he had, he could win you a game from one moment, which we saw on plenty of occasions. And I think for Norwich, a player who, when he arrived, couldn't speak English, and struggled a little bit to adapt. But certainly last season, I think you could see it on his face. He was enjoying his football. Norwich fans absolutely loved him and got to see him go. But I think, again, for the sort of the financial points that Norwich have, they have to sell these players to reinvest the money. And the money they got from Galatasaray for him is something they couldn't turn down. It's a chance for him to go play in Europe. And I think he has sort of goals to try and play for Brazil national team in the future. And, unfortunately, he sort of exceeded Norwich a little bit. And maybe if we get back to the Premier League one day, Norwich could try and get him back. But, certainly a top quality player. But the others, I think, that departed were very much players that were out of contract and that Norwich just didn't see a future for. The likes of Ben Gibson, Sam McCallum, who were on big wages, just didn't quite fit what the new manager wants. Yeah. And for that reason, I think, we all wish them well as they departed, but certainly not sort of sad to see the back of those players.
Okay, fair enough. Any questions, Mark? Sorry, you've just taken a drink, mate. Sorry. Any questions for Adam, mate?
I guess the only question I've thought of is, from the fans' point of view, what's the expectations of Norwich this season? Are they happy to sort of be top 10 and maybe miss out on the playoffs, or is the expectations like it was last season to try and push into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think probably the expectation is just to see that the brand of football and the style that Johannes Hoftorp wants to bring to Norwich, really. I think, certainly no real pressure, I'd say, from him internally or externally to have Norwich in a said position. Obviously, avoid relegation is the key, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for Norwich, given that, amount of sort of depth of quality players they still have at their disposal. I think that most Norwich fans want them to try and challenge for sort of the top six again, given that they've been in and around it for a few years, and naturally Norwich in the Championship are expected to be in and around the top half, certainly sort of the top six whenever they're in it. And I feel probably the Championship more generally is a little bit weaker this year. You look at the sides that have gone up. I think the likes of Leicester and Southampton were streets ahead really of most teams, and of course Ipswich maybe we don't want to talk about too much from our side, but of course, had a bit of a fluke season maybe, and obviously I think most Norwich fans just glad that we didn't lose them again throughout that season. But yeah, I just feel that the sides that come down, if you look at Luton and they struggled a little bit to get back to grips. Burnley, I think, got a little bit of turmoil with transfers still, players that are departing. And I think that maybe adds a little bit of a different dimension. Sheffield United have done some good business, but still, having to try and get, back to used to Championship life. And I don't think they have the same quality of players maybe as Leicester did. So for those reasons, I think, Norwich should be in and around it and challenging. But from a fan's point of view, I don't think there's any expectations really for Norwich to be anywhere in the top six. Just a top half finish would be good, and then build on it for next season. But who knows? These stranger things have happened in football, and maybe Norwich could kick on and have a good season.
Yeah, definitely. Fair play. Any threats from us, or that you find? Do you follow other football teams, or are you very much a Norwich only person?
No, I think particularly when Norwich are in the Championship, I tend to be across the Championship more generally, given it's kind of, I suppose, my daily job as well, covering Norwich. I sort of have to keep myself wedded to the Championship and what's going on. And also have a colleague who's a Coventry fan who obviously helps us in covering Norwich. So we do get a little bit of Sky Blue talk on long journeys to various away games. So yeah, I'm sort of a little bit in the loop. Obviously, I'm aware of some of the main threats. You've mentioned Ben Sheaf might be a potential availability for Saturday. I think we saw that last season, just how good he can be. Victor Torp seems to be a player that I think, I've seen sort of bits of, and I've always been impressed. You've obviously got the danger men up front, the likes of Hadji Wright, who maybe starting to show maybe the player that he can be. I think, obviously had a little bit of a difficult adaptation maybe. You're probably better placed to tell me, but certainly looked to struggle a little bit when he first came in, but maybe now starting to look like the player you signed. Obviously Ellis Sims, I think on his day can be a threat. Yeah, I think you've probably got a better rounded team now. Lots of players across the board that are real danger men, where maybe I looked at Coventry in previous seasons and your eyes were drawn to Gustavo Hamer. They were drawn to Gyökeres. Now I kind of look across the team and I think, yeah, you've got, a solid base there of Championship players that can kick on. I think you've done some pretty good business in the window as well. Some good Championship experienced players in the likes of Thomas Asante, who, I think will score you goals. So, yeah, fully aware of your threats, and I think you'll be in and around the top six, I suppose, this campaign.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Mark, obviously, we played Oxford last night, and there was no sort of injuries that came out of it. Obviously, you've mentioned Ben Sheaf coming back. Thomas Asante scored his first goal. Was a wicked deflection. It reminded me of Callum O'Hare at Wembley a little bit. Yeah. But all round, he works hard enough. But one of the standouts for me was first half, even though it wasn't necessarily the best half of football, was Norman Bassetti, our new striker. He shows, I don't want to say Vic, but he shows glimpses a little bit of Victor Gyökeres. Very much younger, very much rawer than he is, don't get me wrong, and there's a lot more to come to even get to that level. But he showed glimpses, didn't he, of what he was about?
Very lively, very impressive debut. I think it's important obviously that was the talk on social media about comparing with Victor Gyökeres, but I don't think we'll try and build on too much because he has a bad game. Then obviously we'll say he's like, I don't know, Yakubu or someone like that. Darius Henderson in our League One day, someone like that, But no, I think he's definitely got promise, and it was a promising debut. I think he'll be on the bench. He'll be on the bench on Saturday, but a really good option to have, as well as Thomas Asante, who thought was excellent. He did miss a couple of easy chances. Certainly at the end of the first half, he should have scored. But I love his enthusiasm for the game. I love his energy. For me, he just feels a big upgrade on Matty Godden. I thought Matty Godden was a really good servant for us in League One in the Championship. But I think it was the right time to move him on, and I think he's been a really good signing. But looking to Norwich, I think the danger for me is the counter attack with Norwich, and I think that's what we have to be really careful of. And I think having Ben Sheaf back will hopefully help that a bit, because I think Norwich have got I saw that last night against Palace that even their supposed second team were pretty useful on the counter attack. So we have to be on our toes. And one thing I'd like to see on Saturday is a clean sheet, because I can't remember the last time we've kept a clean sheet. I think it's probably Blackburn away at near the end of the season. So that's something I'd like to see at home. But I forget about Norwich's start. They're a good side. So I expect them to be a difficult test for us.
Yeah, my worry is, and I mentioned this to Adam off air before we came on, is the fact that we're starting games still a little bit too slow. And if Norwich come out the traps quite quick, we could be 2-3-0 down in a blink of an eye, couldn't we? And that's my worry a little bit, Mark.
Well, it's been the common thing with 12:30 kickoffs first half. We just don't seem to show up. I mean, Bristol City last week, particularly the first half, we were very, very poor. And although the goal they scored was dubious offside goal, but in reality, it was a deserved goal because they were better than us. So we have to approach this game much more positive, like we did in the Oxford game. We played Oxford off the park in that first half, and hopefully that'll be the theme for Saturday. But it needs to be better because Norwich are a really good side. It's gonna be a big test for us. So we need to approach the game in the right frame of mind. I just hope that the return of Sheaf gives us that lift that we need to get us that win.
Yeah, definitely. Before we go into predictions, then, Mark, any other questions for Adam?
I'm just trying to think of any questions I've got. What the performance has been like at home? Obviously, played 2 games. Obviously, Blackburn was a 2-2 draw. I think it was 1-1 against Sheffield United. What the performance is like? Was it just a case of just poor defending for the goals? I know it was a bit of a kick against Blackburn because they scored pretty late, didn't they? So what's the last couple of league games been like for you?
Yeah, I think individual mistakes has kind of been a little bit of a theme of Norwich's season so far. I mean, you sort of go back to even the opening day against Oxford, it's Grant Hanley being outmuscled by Harris for the first goal, and that kind of was, I suppose, the common theme maybe of the sort of season more generally. There was I think the game against Blackburn that was Shane Duffy that made a mistake for Blackburn's opener, allowing Ryan Hedges in behind to score, and just those sort of little individual moments that are just happening, I suppose, in games. But I think more generally the performance levels have been pretty good. I think fans have after both games at home have stayed behind to applaud the team and sort of show their support, which I sort of contrast that to last season. There was games where Norwich would win in good fashion at home, and ultimately the fans weren't happy with the performance on the pitch despite the win, and maybe would leave the stadium a little bit early. So that kind of maybe shows where I think the fans are at the moment. Despite the results, the mood is generally upbeat. The performances are gradually improving. The patterns of play are starting to, I suppose, be shown more on the pitch every game as we sort of move further on into the season. And yeah, I've personally been quite impressed. I've had spells in games where maybe they've dropped off a little bit and other teams have maybe got hold of the ball. Norwich want to try and dominate the ball, and I think it's just trying to maybe cut out those defensive mistakes and just still keep on improving in this sort of new style of play that they're being told to play. And I just think it's going to be a work in progress, as I sort of already mentioned a few times now. They've got lots of players that are sort of players that are just sort of square pegs in round holes, and it's just trying to get other players that are coming through the building. Lots of these are from abroad as well that are maybe having to acclimatise to a new culture, a new team, new teammates. And I think it's going to take time. But the performance levels have been good. Fans are feeling good. It's just a case of now looking for that first win. And, of course, everyone from Norwich Persuasion is hoping it might come against a side we generally do quite well against.
Every chance. I hope not, but every chance. Any questions for us, Adam?
I suppose where do you maybe pitch Norwich this season? I think it's obviously interesting for us to try and get where fans maybe view us in the table. I think lots of people maybe look at us usually as a threat in the Championship, some team that should be in and around the top 6. I think you both mentioned maybe top 10, but where maybe do you see this team I suppose, being in and around the end of the campaign?
Yeah, for me, probably, I would probably say nearer top six. I know you've had a slow start. I know it hasn't gone maybe according to plan, but as you've just mentioned, it feels like us probably last season when we had a raft of new players, and then they're just we heard gelling a lot, for the team to gel. So I think it's that, but Norwich are always a good side. You've always got good strength in depth, and as Mark's already alluded to, when you've got somebody like Josh Sargent still on your books, you're always going to be there. He's always going to be one of the main threats in the Championship, let alone just for Norwich. He's a really, really talented player. So for me, somewhere, top six or just slightly outside of, because I think you'll turn your fortune around. Hopefully it's after Saturday, obviously. Mark, how do you feel about that question?
I think on the face of it, I would say, bearing in mind the signings and the players gone, I'd say probably 8th or 9th. But I think you made a good point earlier, Adam, about the fact that I don't think the Championship is a stronger league this season. I mean, you look at who's top of the league, Sunderland and Watford. I don't think anyone would have expected that at the start of the season. So I think it may take time. I still think Burnley will be up there along with Sheffield United probably. I think Luton will come good. But I think for Norwich, I think if they keep their players fit and their best players fit, they've got a chance of playoffs. I think my concern with Norwich is if they lose a couple of key players. I'm thinking someone like Sargent. I'm thinking someone like Science in that sort of wide left position. I'd say 8th or 9th. I'm probably going to say 8th or 9th for me. I'm going to say 8th to be kind to Adam. So,
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions, Mark?
No, nothing more for me. No.
Okay, we'll start with you then, Adam. Can I have a prediction off you for Saturday's game?
Yeah, I think it could be another entertaining affair. I think, generally speaking, when these two sides meet, they tend to be pretty good games of football, usually a fair amount of goals. Maybe the two last season didn't quite throw up the same level of drama as maybe previous times. I sort of remember was it 4-2 at the CBS a couple of years back? I think obviously the way we won it at Carrow Road last season, Borja signs sort of late on in the game, which I think all spanned from, was it the pre-match where David Wagner slightly insulted Coventry saying about sexy football, and obviously it all kind of kicked off a little bit from there, and sort of the banter, I suppose, between the two sets of fans. And I think that felt like quite a turning point actually for Norwich in sort of a difficult period. It was a win that maybe catapulted them to the level of form that they then needed to push towards the playoffs, which obviously they achieved, and fell at the first hurdle in terms of the semis. But yeah, I think it's going to be another good game of football. I think my head says another draw, to be honest, for Norwich, and then maybe post the international break where they've had a couple of weeks and the transfer window shut. They know who's in the building, and everyone's heads can be sort of reset a little bit. And I think there's still kind of maybe rumours around individuals in the Norwich camp, which is not sort of helpful, I suppose. It's not been helpful in any of the games so far. I think our managers maybe spoken around, and other managers as well. I remember Waldo in his post-match the other day, just about the window being a bit of a distraction, for clubs. Certainly, moving on into the season, it really ideally should be shut before a ball is kicked. But of course, we're dealing with that. And I think hopefully for Norwich, Josh Sargent will still be in the building by the time we make the trip to Coventry on Saturday. And with that, I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Nice. Okay. Did I ask you, Mark? Sorry, what did you say?
Well, I'll sit on the fence, aren't I? I'm probably going to go for a draw as well.
You're going to go for a draw?
I don't like predicting us to win. I should do really, but I'm always wrong when I say that. So you'll be pleased to know I'll be back on the fence. I'm going to say a 3-3 draw this one.
Wow, there's going to be goals then.
I
you wanted a clean sheet.
I know, but that's my heart speaking. That's not my head speaking.
Okay, all right.
My head's saying 3-3. I think both teams got a mistake in defensively. I will say that Ben Sheaf will make a big difference. I'm hoping that'll help, but I just think I can see us getting goals. I think Norwich on the counter attack are always a threat, and I think when we go forward, we're a decent side going forward. So I'm going to say it's going to be plenty of goals. It'll probably be 0-0. I've said all that, but I'm going to go 3-3. Okay,
fair enough. Well, I I don't sit on the fence, and I never predict us to lose. The worst I'll ever do is a draw. But I do think that we are playing at quite a good time because, as you've mentioned already, Adam, you are a team that is gelling, if you like. So I think that our fortunes are going to change. We've got to start winning. We've got to start beating you at some point. So we may as well start Saturday, mightn't we? So I'm going to go for a 2-1. A 2-1 win to Coventry, I think. Just with the fact that you're, like you said, you're going through a little bit of change at the moment. You haven't started off the best. So I just think that that you're there for the take, and I think we're going to take it. So I'm going to go 2-1. So now we've done predictions. As always, Adam, I like our guests. You've done it before. Quickfire questions. Slightly different this year because each of the team's podcasts that I've done so far, I've asked the same questions, and I'll be making notes of your answers, and then we'll refer to it in the corresponding fixture just to see if anything's changed or if anything's different. Okay, so again, it is quick fire, so one-worded answers, but I don't mind if you say a few worded answers if you really need to. So the first one is player to look out for Norwich.
Mankwa Forson.
Forson. Lovely. Where will Cov finish?
5th.
Oh, nice. In the playoffs. I love that. Thank you very much. Where will you finish?
8th.
Okay. And one player you could take from us? You can say nobody if you feel that you don't feel that anyone will go in.
Let's go Ben Sheaf. I think Ben Sheaf.
Okay. Ben Sheaf. Lovely. That's it. Nice and easy. Thank you very much. Actually, one other one. Jonas Hoff Torup. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I think positive. I think it's the right decision, right appointment. Hopefully, going to bring back the sort of Norwich style of play that we've all been used to down the years. And yeah, I think when we hopefully eventually, if we do reach the Premier League with him, we've got a chance of trying to establish ourselves for the first time in what will be feels like years and years and years.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So just before we do let you go, just remind us where we can find you and what you do.
Yeah, so it's at the Pink 'Un. Sports sort of arm of the Norwich Evening News, Eastern Daily Press. So you can find us in print. So if you're sort of down in Norfolk, you can pick up either of those papers. The Pink 'Un's in there on a Saturday, on a Monday. Obviously, sports pages as well during the week. So all your latest news, match reports, etc., etc. We're on website at Pink 'Un. So yeah, again, all the news, match reports, etc. YouTube, match previews, press conferences, verdicts, podcasts, interviews, everything, you name it, we've got it. And of course, we're on all the sort of major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, etc. So that's the Pink 'Un podcast. And then, yeah, all the socials as well. So at Pink 'Un on pretty much all of those, Facebook, X, Instagram. We've got a WhatsApp channel as well, which, of course, you can get all the latest news straight to your phone. So, yeah, plenty of good places to find us for everything Norwich, and particularly, obviously, for this game, any Coventry fans, that might be interested.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you, Adam, for joining us. Mark, before we do go, do you want to plug your little show that you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm planning to do a show on Tuesday night. It'll be a live show, the debate. So I'm just going to talk about the first 4 games of the season. We'll talk a bit about the cup as well. We'll look at sort of the transfer window as well, and how we feel the players have performed, the new players in particular. So yeah, got a couple of guests lined up for that. So it'll be 7:30 start on Tuesday. They'll be live on our social media channels. So I hope you can join us and hope you enjoy it.
Fantastic. Just remember where you can find us and where you can find Mark as well. Next Tuesday at 7:30. We are on X or Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. It is scrolling down there as well. We are on podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Please go and rate us 5 stars if you listen to us. If you watch us on YouTube, please go and like and subscribe. It is free and it helps us out a lot massively. We're sponsored by Right Steel Fabrications, and we're partnered with the Anecdote Sports Bar at the CBS Arena, and we're also partnered with the Sky Blue Tavern. So once again, thank you, Mark, for joining me. Thank you, Adam, very much for joining me as well. Much appreciated. Play up Sky Blues. Good luck for the rest of the season, Adam, obviously, apart from our fixtures.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Thanks. Cheers. Thanks.